everybody. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Allison.
And this is Nerd of the Week, a randomly generated fandom podcast. Hey, Allison, should we ask the generator what our word is to remind everyone?
Of course.
The word of the week is vampire.
Thank you, generator.
Thanks, generator. So for a definition, vampire is a... These words are long. Oh my goodness. One's about the vampire bat. The other definition is a noun that is a corpse in European folklore to leave its grave at night and drink the blood of the living by biting their necks with long pointed canine teeth.
Very specific. Okay.
Very specific definition of vampire based on random, very quick Google searching.
I feel like it's not just European folklore, but who am I to say?
Right, I feel like there's vampire-esque lore in most cultures, but maybe I'm wrong on that front.
Maybe it's later vampire lore that we think is older than it is, but really it's just because of the European vampires? Maybe it's the Dracula, Bram Stoker, where everyone's thinking it's European. Mm-hmm. I don't know these things. And it doesn't matter for this podcast.
Not for this podcast.
But listener, if you'd like to do your own research and then talk to us on Twitter.
Oh, good
feel
entry.
Free.
That was an excellent segue into. We have a Twitter account, and you can find us at Nerd of the Week Podcast or at Nerd of the Week. And you can hashtag us at #Nerd of the Week, #NotW, because it made me and Allison laugh, and hashtag Nerd of the Week Podcast, one of those three, and you can tell us about it. Or you can tell us what you talk about with vampires. And in that...
Have we gotten any responses on our Twitter yet?
No.
We'll
get there.
Step to it. Come on.
Yeah. The banner is the same banner that is for our podcast, and our profile picture is a rock that is in disguise that, no, I will not explain what it is, but he's glorious.
Maybe that will come up as one of our things if it flows with one of our words.
I don't know that Dr. Shape Epitope is ever going to flow with one of our words, but I guess we'll find out.
You never know. We'll see. That's a story for another day, listener.
That is very much a story for another day, listener. On that glorious, beautiful note,
you start.
I am going to talk about the Dresden Files series. It is a book series written by Jim Butcher, not James Butcher. I'm sorry, Jim Butcher. Don't yell at me. Are you aware of this series at all?
I've heard the name. I had no idea it had to do with vampires.
So there is vampires in the book, and it's not predominantly vampires, but they do have like a running plot that kind of goes through the story. So there's like a bunch of, it's told like a serial, like a film noir drama of like she walked in and she was 10 pounds of trouble in a 5-pound sack kind of situation. And the stick here is basically everything that goes bump in the night, all the folklore, everything's real. It's just that the normal humans, mortals, just pretend it's not, or mostly ignore it. And the kind of running theory is that there's more normal mortals than there are the supernatural world, so they could absolutely find out about the supernatural world and mess everyone up. So they try to keep the supernatural world very apart from the normal world. And so it's a little
bit like the wizarding world
of
Harry Potter.
Absolutely, exactly that. And there are vampires, and they do play a key role in the series. I'm specifically going to talk about Changes, which is the 12th book in the series. Oh
my gosh, how many are there?
I believe there are currently 17, with the plan for at least 3 more, maybe 4 more.
Oh.
They're not super long. They're like serial novels, so they're like 200 pages a pop or so. They get a little bit longer now that the plots...
Are they like episodic, or do they actually all flow together?
They both. So they each book is about like a specific thing or like a case that the main character's working. Mm-hmm. And there's usually like an A plot, a B plot, and then the C plot is what's going on in the world behind. And the cool thing with the series is, so it's told from Harry Dresden, the main character's point of view. And basically the world kind of opens up as he gets more immersed into the world. So like the first couple of books, he was pegged as like a warlock or a rogue wizard by the Wizarding Council, the White Council. They're the
Is he a wizard?
He is a wizard. So he is he is Chicago's or he lives in the small little town of Chicago, and he is the world's only wizard for hire. And he advertises that he's a wizard for hire. And he starts off the series kind of having a complex and just an issue with authority, because for reasons beyond his control, he murdered a guy because that guy was trying to like take over his mind and turn him basically into a zombie or a thrall. Okay. And so he was defending himself.
Self-defense.
Yeah. But murder is one of the, like, you do not do this thing. You do not murder people with magic, or you are a bad guy.
Well, you shouldn't murder people anyway.
Right.
But especially with magic, I guess.
But especially with magic. There's the rules of magic. And so if you break one of these rules, it's basically like, there is no gray area. It is, you are a terrible person. Okay. But because he was a minor, and because his grandfather, who he doesn't know at the time, the hebdomadal spoiler warning for our podcast, his grandfather is on the White Council, or like one of the main important wizards in the council. Mm-hmm. He got basically like probation with a Grey Warden. Those are basically the wizard police, to hang out and like monitor him all the time. So his kind of pushback was like, you know what? Screw you guys. I'm going to tell the world that there is wizards. And so he has like a literal ad in the paper that's like, need a professional wizard? Come to me. I'll help you find your lost cat. Or like, you got fairies that are bothering you? I'll help clear them out of your house. Like that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So Harry Dresden, he also works with the police department for special investigations. So kind of like the things they can't explain, they'll come to him, and he'll like go through and see things with his magic sight and be able to see, oh, this is actually kind of in my realm of weirdness. So the special investigation unit, not every person on there knows that the wizarding world and the supernatural world is real, but his eventually close friend Karen Murphy, one of the officers on the SI investigation, knows that things aren't always as they seem. So he becomes kind of like the point man for when a murder is because of a werewolf and not because of a normal human.
That's great.
Yeah, no, it's a good series. The first couple of books, admittedly, are a little rough, but as the series progresses, it gets a lot better. And Changes is actually my favorite of the series. It's kind of a good, as the name kind of suggests, it's kind of a good switch. And Harry starts to be more involved in the world. And the cool thing
book number is that?
That is book number 12.
No, that's a long way in. Okay.
Yeah, so he becomes more aware of things and the recognition that it's not all about him and that there are other things going on. As he grows as a character, you learn more about the universe as he starts to talk to more people, open his network. You learn more about what's going on here.
Now, can you just kind of jump into this series anywhere, or like should you start at the beginning?
Honestly, probably should start at the beginning. Okay. Because it builds, there's characters. You could probably pick up one book. He does explain everything really well. Like the first handful of things, like he'll always say Karen Murphy works with the Special Investigations Unit, and he'll talk about like different people that he's worked with and how he knows them. So you could technically pick up a book mid-series and you'd be a little lost at the beginning, but I think that the story itself is usually well contained in the book, that you might miss some things that are mentioned or some foreshadowing that won't come into play or has fallen into place because of stuff that's been mentioned in a couple books beforehand, but you could probably make it through okay.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, you're fine. I love this series. It's quite fun. I listened to them on audiobook, and they are narrated by James Marsters, who is Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and he does such
another vampire.
Another vampire.
Yeah,
that's actually how my brain got there, and then I was like, I'm going to talk about this. And I literally can't physically read the books anymore. I have to wait for the audiobooks to come out because he does such a good job narrating them that, like, he is the voice of Harry Dresden for me. And then he does a bunch of character voices too, which are just perfect. His audiobook reading skills are just sublime. They're excellent. So for vampires, so there is a scene in an earlier book, just to set some stages to kind of explain what's going to go through changes, where there's different courts of vampires, and there's the red court and the black court and the white court, who are the kind of the main players, and then there's like a hint at the jade court, who are kind of Asian on that continent vampires, but we don't hear a lot about them. And the red court is kind of more of like the bloodlust vampires. The white court are more of like an energy type vampire, where they feed off of like a specific type of energy that you have. And then the black court is more of like the Bram Stoker, like Dracula type vampires, so like the hide in the shadows kind that you would think of.
Okay.
And through some series of events, Harry got framed, more or less, for the murder of a Red Court vampire a few books prior, and basically threw the wizards and the vampires into a full-blown war that has been going on in the backdrop for most of the series up until now. The other important character, Susan Rodriguez, was a woman who used to write for kind of like a magazine that talked about supernatural things. So kind of like Luna Lovegood's The Quibbler. That was kind of her thing, was she would write about these things being like, no, they're actually real, and people wouldn't listen to her. So she fell into Harry's world because of her writing and her just journalism. And she pushed a little bit too far and got bit by a vampire. But standard vampire rules in that you have to feed to turn completely into a vampire. So Susan's never fed, but so she's kind of in this half stage of being not a full vampire. So she and Harry were a couple for a little while before everything kind of fell apart, and then she disappeared off the face of the planet. And Harry hasn't heard from her in a while. And then all of a sudden, in this book, she gets in contact with him, and turns out, surprise, Harry has a daughter. And she's been kidnapped by the Duchess Ariana, who is the Red Court Duke vampire. And the Duchess Ariana has beef with Harry's grandfather, whose name is Ebenezer McCoy. But this is the book where we find out, I don't think Harry puts it together in this book, but I think he very quickly puts it together in the next book. But this is the book where we, the reader, find out that McCoy is his grandfather. And Harry goes to talk to the council to try to seek help and be like, hey, my kid's in trouble. I've been doing all this stuff to try to help you. I've been helping fight in the vampire wars. Like, help me out. And they're like, classic white council, we're old wizards and we're gonna talk about it. And Harry's like, all right, screw you guys. I'm just gonna go and beat people up and figure it out. And the other important bit to this is that Harry's half-brother is a White Court vampire. His name is Thomas. He's excellent. He is literally my favorite character in the books.
He sounds delightful.
He's so good. The first time you see him, I believe he was at the Bianca's party, the vampire that Harry got framed for murdering. And he's dressed up like just in like wings and like a leotard situation. And he's just kind of flouncing about being just a glorious bastard. And he is just like, his quips are excellent. You would like him. He's an excellent character. He's well written. Harry's always super jealous of him because he describes him as like unwholesomely good looking and like someone's painting of the forgotten Greek god of body cologne. And he comes off as like this ne'er-do-well who doesn't really care about anything, but he's actually like more caring and deeper of a character than he lets on, because his vampire father and then eventually his sister will use his family ties and stuff against him. So he's like trying to pretend that he's keeping everything at arm's length while also like pulling strings from behind the scenes to make sure that his brother's always taken care of, his girlfriend's always taken care of, that kind of stuff. So he's great. So Harry is often not trusted. Only Harry and Thomas are aware that they are brothers. Everyone else just thinks that Harry is either in the thrall of this White Court vampire, because White Court vampires typically feed off of like desire is kind of their normal one, where they're like more of a sexual innuendo to them. So everyone thinks that Harry and Thomas are gay lovers, and Harry's like, nope. And I can't tell you he's my brother, so I have to just ride along with this one.
Aw.
And so he often isn't trusted when it comes to vampire stuff, because they're like, but your best friend is Thomas, and he's a vampire. So it becomes this extra layer of difficulty where they're trying to figure out everything. So back to changes. Harry eventually gets back to Chicago, where he's all annoyed, and as he's getting home, he finds out that his home office, or his office building where he works out of, got exploded. And because people were thinking he was going to be there to try to take him out, because he's kind of one of the main investigators that's been making it really hard for the Red Court vampires to get an upper edge in the war. And Harry ends up, the FBI is actually investigating him for the blow up of his building, because it was his building. And so his friend Karen Murphy, the police officer, has to like kind of skirt him around the FBI and be like, nope, go hide, you're not here right now. And while Harry is kind of running away, he actually runs into the Norse god Odin, who also is in this book and is an excellent character. But Odin gives him the tip-off that the Red Court is actually going to use his daughter, Maggie, for a powerful blood curse. And this blood curse is if you kill the youngest in a family line, then it'll kill everyone above them. And so Harry naturally thinks this is because of him, because they're mad at him. But the plot twist here is they actually have connected Maggie to Ebenezer, and Ebenezer is also known as the Black Staff of the White Council, where he's basically like...
So many colors. You should have brought this for colors.
I should have brought this for colors, now that I'm saying everything.
Sorry, go on.
You're fine. No, that's fair. So he's the Black Staff of the White Council, which is the, like, kind of hitman with no rules, like Spectre status situation, where he can go around and take out things. And it turns out that Ebenezer killed the Duke, Ariana's husband. So she's out for revenge because she's real mad about that situation. So Harry goes to try to figure out who's implicating him in the office explosion while also trying to figure out where the heck his daughter is. And he returns home to find out that his poor apartment, which is basically the basement of this boarding house, has also been attacked by the vampires.
Oh.
And he goes in to help save the older couples that live in the building, because he lives in the basement and then there's a bunch of older couples who live above him. So he goes in to try to save them, and he ends up falling as he's helping someone, and falls on his back and actually breaks his back. And while he's in this dream state and realizing he's probably never going to walk again, he makes a deal with Queen Mab, who is the Queen of the Fairies of the Winter Court, and she turns him into her Winter Knight, which is going to cause a lot of problems for him in the future.
Uh-oh.
But at the moment, it's going to give him his ability to walk back and also soup him up with more superpowers. So he takes a couple of levels in his D&D class of Wizard and takes the crew of people that he typically works with, and they find out that his daughter is in Chichen Itza, where they're going to do the final blood sacrifice. So they go and do some montage sequence to get everything ready to go, and then they go to confront the Red Court, and they find Maggie, and Harry ends up dueling Ariana with some shenanigans pulled on his front, and they are able to get Maggie back, but then turns out Susan's also here.
Wait, who's Susan?
Susan is Maggie's mom, so she was the reporter at the beginning that was kind of a vampire.
Yes. Okay.
And so Harry finds out that Harry manages to save Maggie, but now Susan's stuck there, so he can't leave her behind. So he goes back to try to save them, and there's a sudden but inevitable betrayal by one of the other characters in the series. And Susan loses control and attacks this guy and drinks his blood and turns into a vampire. And Harry, without realizing it, but then seeing the opportunity, because it was right before this bloodline curse was about to occur, he apologizes to Susan, but she's basically in the I don't want to be a vampire, kill me. So he does, and then he unleashes the bloodline curse on the Red Court vampires. So basically he wiped out all of the Red Court vampires, because Susan was the youngest for that short period of time. And basically eliminated this threat in one foul, crazy, wild swoop.
Oh my.
Yeah. And that, it's such a good read, and the buildup is excellent, and the plot pieces that have been building up to this book, so it's the 12th book, has just been, hinted at, and you're finally getting a lot of payoffs that you haven't gotten in a while, and you get all the plot twists. You get Ebenezer being Harry's grandfather. Dresden, Harry finds out that a friend of his can take his daughter to help raise her, because he knows he's kind of still a target, because he did just wipe out all the Red Court vampires, so the other vampire courts are going to be a little wary of him, and he's got all these enemies, so he's going to place her in the care of one of his good friends, who is one of the Knights of the Cross, who is also an excellent character, that's the end of this book, and then it goes on for other series and to the next handful of books. The Dresden Files kind of jumps, and so each book kind of covers like a group of the supernatural. So there's definitely books that are more vampire heavy, and there's books that are more fairy heavy, and then there's the ghosts heavy. And Yeah.
I don't like ghosts. Of all the supernatural creatures, I don't like ghosts.
That's fair. Ghosts are scary. The ghost book in here are usually really good mysteries, like figuring out why they died, or the ghost is pretty cool. Like, there's a ghost story, I believe, where Harry becomes friends with this really old ghost that used to be like a big game hunter in his previous life, and he like goes around and stops other ghosts from being baddies, and he's pretty cool. So the series has like really good memorable characters, and there's enough in there that keeps you hooked and wanting to come back. And he just finished up with the last book in his series right now, and we're waiting for the next one to come out, and I'm just like chomping at the bit. So I was excited to be able to talk about this one. And Harry is the like long-suffering, unreliable narrator type who is snarky and sarcastic, and I absolutely relate to him sometimes.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm. So,
that is very, very good.
Mm-hmm. It's a good time.
I think I might have to get into these books.
I would recommend. Like I said, the first one's a little rough, and there's a couple of scenes that you're like, really? This is that needed to be in here? You couldn't just like mention it happened. But other than that, on the whole, 9 out of 10 for the whole series for me.
Excellent.
So when you read the first one, which is called Stormfront, accept that it's the first book in the series, and then go to the next one.
Okay. Could I maybe like read a summary on Wikipedia and then just go to the next one?
Honestly, yeah, because I read Stormfront like years and years ago, and then I got into the series only a couple years ago, because Stormfront came out in 2000. And then I actually started revisiting the series about 4 years ago, so I remembered nothing from Stormfront, and I just started with the next one, and I did fine. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, but I would recommend these, and if you like audiobooks, the narration is just so good. He does so good, and it's something they go by real fast.
Nice, yeah. That sounds like a good listen or read.
All right, so I have 3 questions for you. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. What is Harry's full name, our main character? Harry Houdini Dumorn Dresden. Harry, so that's 1. For B, Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden. C, Harry Houdini Dresden the 5th. Or D, Harry Potter Dresden.
Okay, I don't think it's the last 2.
Okay.
I think it's B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Harry's father named him after all of the famous wizards and magicians of the normal world. And names have power in the series. So if someone has exactly how you say your name, they have control over you. So it's beneficial to have multiple middle names so that you have a little bit of protection. So smart. And I always like that his name is Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden.
Yes, it's very good.
All right.
I kind of figured it was one of those named after others with the power. Yeah, I get it. Okay, go on.
In what city does Harry live?
Chicago.
Woo woo. And then question 3 is, Harry is often seen driving around in his signature car. What is the color and make of Harry's car? A, is it a gray Jeep? Is it a B, blue Beetle? Is it C, a white Ford? Or D, a green Chrysler?
I think it's B.
Yeah, it is a blue Beetle, which is no longer blue. It is a Beetle, a Volkswagen Beetle, that has been destroyed so many times in the series that I think literally just like the case is the the blue, and everything else is like green and red and yellow.
Fun.
It's a signature car. And
that's excellent.
it's quite humorous because Harry is always described as like a giant, like he's like 6'7" or something absurd. And so him driving around in a tiny Beetle is always like an excellent visual.
Yes. Oh, that sounds magnificent. This is exactly the kind of thing that I like.
Yeah, I think you'd like this series. There's a little bit of grimdark, but there's a lot of humor in it too.
Mm-hmm. No, it kind of reminds me of a series that I almost did bring this week, called the Jonathan Cabal or the Cabal Brothers series by Jonathan L. Howard. Also has like vampires. The main guy, his name is I don't need to go into all this.
We can sidebar. It's okay. We can sidebar.
No, I'm sure I'm going to talk about the series at some point for something else.
I'm excited to hear about it.
But yeah, I almost brought it for this one because it does have vampires.
Fair enough.
Anyway, what's next? Oh, it's my turn next.
It is your turn next.
But also a quote first.
All right.
So I can't find succinct quotes, so it's a long one. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I'm not against this.
So listener, feel free to play along at home. Here we go.
You'll probably do better than me.
But his needs are more shocking than the needs of other animals and men. Are his deeds more outrageous than the deeds of the parent who drained the spirit from his child? The vampire may foster quickened heartbeats and levitated hair, but is he worse than the parent who gave to society a neurotic child who became a politician? Is he worse than the manufacturer who set up belated foundations with the money he made by handing bombs and guns to suicidal nationalists? Is he worse than the distiller who gave bastardized grain juice to stultify further the brains of those who, sober, were incapable of progressive thought? Nay, I apologize for this calumny. I sip the brew that feeds me. Is he worse than the publisher who filled ubiquitous racks with lust and death wishes? Really now, search your soul, lovey. Is the vampire so bad?
Oh, I think I know this. Ooh, I'm excited.
Cool. Well, you're going to have some time to think about it and solidify in your mind.
Right.
But anyway, I shall go on with my pick for the week.
Okay.
It's Twilight.
Yeah.
No, it's not. I'm joking.
Dang.
It's not.
I was so hoping you'd pick Twilight. All right, what is it actually?
Okay, it is actually the movie What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh,
you might have heard of the show What We Do in the Shadows, but this is the movie that came first and inspired the show.
Okay.
So it was put out in 2015. It was actually created by Jermaine Clement and Taika. Oh gosh, what?
Taika Waititi.
Yes, Taika Waititi.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of came up with the idea, directed and produced it. They also star in it as two of the vampires. So Viago is Taika's character and Vladislav is Jermaine's character. And then we also have the vampire Deacon, who is played by one of their friends, Johnny Braw. They are all from New Zealand, all New Zealand actors. The whole video production, everything was shot in New Zealand. And it was like this real indie film kind of thing that they just thought it would be funny, so they made it, that kind of thing. They didn't really have any big expectations for it. Mm-hmm. But now it's a beloved series that was produced in America instead. But we're not talking about that. We're just talking about the movie. All right. So it is written and filmed like a mockumentary, so kind of like Modern Family or The Office, but with vampires.
The best.
There's lots of just... Oh, first off, have you like seen this? Are you familiar with this?
I have only seen the series, the show. I have not seen the movie.
Okay. So I think it's fairly similar from what I can tell, just like the things they kind of get up to and whatnot. But anyway, the movie, it's, you know, a whole like cohesive thing. So it has like lots of just kind of vampire iconography and lore and everything. They have, since it's like supposed to be like a mockumentary, documentary kind of thing, they always have like these pictures or old images and videos that like have the boys in it, but like they look really well done. Like they're very convincing old pieces. So that always is fun. And the whole thing kind of opens up with the first vampire, Viago, waking up out of his coffin. He levitates out of it and then, like, peekily looks out the window curtains, and he's excited because it's nighttime. So he's like, finally I'm safe. He goes around to wake up the other boys. So he first goes to Deacon, who sleeps in a closet hanging upside down. And he's like,
if I was a vampire, I'd sleep in a closet hanging upside down too.
I feel like the coffin would be more comfortable.
I know, but I just always sleep funny, so I feel like I'd be the weirdo in the closet.
So, anyway, he goes to Deacon. He's like, they're gonna have a meeting in the kitchen in about 15 minutes. And Deacon's like, okay, whatever. Then he goes and wakes up Vladislav, and he's, like, in some room. He has, like, some weird thing going on in there. He can transform into a lot of different things, so it's always, like, weird whatever opens up behind his door. And he's like, we're going to have a meeting for about 15 minutes. And Vladislav is like, make it 20. He's like, oh, okay.
That's a whole mood.
And then finally he goes down to the basement to wake up Peter, who sleeps standing up in a crypt, like a stone crypt. And Peter is very scary looking. He is, like, completely bald. His ears are, like, all long like a bat. And all of his teeth are fangs, not just his canine teeth. And they, like, stick out of his mouth. And he's very scary, like, even for the other vampires. And so Viago's like, I thought I'd extend the invitation to come to the meeting, but no pressure. You can stay down here if you'd like. And then he's just, like, kind of looking around the room, and he's like, oh, and what's this? Oh, it's a spinal column. Disgusting. I should bring a broom down, and maybe you can sweep it up. And Peter just, like, hisses at him. He's like, oh, okay.
And whatever you want, man, it's okay.
And leaves Peter down there. Then we kind of, like, break out into them going to the kitchen. They're having the meeting. The meeting is about that Deacon has not washed the dishes for 5 years. And they're full of blood and everything. And he's like, we are vampires. We shouldn't have to wash the dishes. But Viago is very against that idea. He's like, I'm embarrassed when I bring victims over. I want it to look nice. So they, like, get all into this argument. Throughout kind of this scene, they have little breakout, like, you know, the interview kind of things that documentaries or reality shows have with the contestants. It's like that kind of thing where it's just them kind of talking at the camera about what was happening in the scene.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we learn about where these guys are coming from. So for Viago, we learn that he is 379 years old, and he really likes the company of others. He really likes living in the flat with them as roommates. He's a bit pedantic, as described by the other ones, a little bit OCD. He was actually an 18th century dandy, and so he's, like, really fussy and proper about everything. He apparently came to New Zealand because of love. He actually knew this human girl back where he was from in Europe, and so she came to the country. He was already a vampire, and he had his servant ship him in his coffin to New Zealand, but the servant put on the wrong shipping, and he took too long to get to New Zealand. By the time he got there, his love was in love with someone else and married and had a family.
Oh, no.
And so he was sad, and he at one point says, like, I considered biting him and killing him and having her for my own, but then I saw how happy she was, and so I just let him be. And there's every now and again you see him just, like, kind of standing outside of the building where she currently lives and just, like, looking up at her. And she's this poor old lady now, but he, like, hasn't forgotten her. He still loves her. And
so
like,
cute.
just periodically throughout the movie, he goes and just, like, watches in on her. Not in, like, a creepy way, just in, like, oh, you're still here kind of way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of Iago's background. For Deacon, they describe him as, like, the rebellious and young vampire who just wants to have a good time. And he's only 183 years old. He was actually a merchant who came across this creepy castle in Eastern Europe, and then a bat attacked him. It was Peter the vampire. And he's like, and we've been friends ever since. So that's fun. He also was apparently on the side of the Nazis during the World War II. He was a Nazi vampire. And he says, and the reason I came to New Zealand, because after the war, if you're a Nazi, and if you're a vampire, no. But if you're a Nazi vampire, no way. I'm out of there. So he's stowed away to New Zealand to avoid prosecution.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then finally, there's Vladislav. And we don't actually learn why he came to New Zealand, but he's there. But he was from the medieval times. He's 862 years old. And he was apparently turned when he was 16. He's like, so that's why I always look 16. And he does not look 16. And that's kind of the joke. He's like this big, like, hunky guy with, like, black beard and whiskers and everything. And, like, he looks like a powerful old king, not 16.
Do you think that was, like, a vague punch at the Twilight?
Oh, it probably was. Yeah. Anyway, the other vampires, they're like, it's pretty cool that he still has it together after all this time. Apparently, though, he's, like, been to, like, some dark places in his mind. He had a torture chamber where he liked to poke people, and by poke, he means stab with things.
Oh,
so
yes.
he's like, they called me Vladislav the Poker. Oh, no. But he's like,
the most intimidating of names.
Exactly. And he says, I would torture when I was in a dark place. But he doesn't do it anymore because he's fine. He's better
fine
now. And maybe it's because he lives with his friends. I don't know. And then we don't really get a whole lot of backstory on Peter, except that he's 8,000 years old.
Oh.
So, and that's why he is not expected to come to the meetings.
Because he's terrifying.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so that's kind of the background.
Okay.
The whole thing of this movie is like the events and months leading up to the unholy masquerade of the secret society. Mm-hmm. It says that each crew member who filmed was wearing a crucifix to protect them during the filming. The vampires granted them clemency during this time. And there's not really like a whole lot of plot. It's just kind of like following them around.
Uh-huh.
So the first kind of beat after we meet the boys is that they're going out to find some victims. So they're going into town. And the big thing is they can't see themselves in mirrors, which it's weird because they can actually they can show up in pictures, which I think for other vampires in other lore, you can't see them in pictures either or mirrors.
Yeah.
But for these guys, there's
true.
definitely pictures. But they can't be seen in mirrors, so they have to, like, draw each other pictures of what they look like, and they say, we steal a lot of our clothes from our victims, and so they have, like, all these crazy, eccentric outfits. Like, they just stand out like sore thumbs when they go into town, but they think they look so good. Vladislav says something like, I'm going for dead but delicious.
Ooh. It's an evening wear.
Exactly. He does go out in a top hat.
Ooh, well, I mean, you have to.
Yeah. What else? Their problem is they can't get into bars because they have to be invited in as vampires. Oh. But the bouncers, they go up to the bouncer like, would you like to invite us in? And the bouncers are like, no, get out of here. You're weird. We then learn that there's about 60 to 70 vampires in the greater Wellington region. They're all part of the secret society. So as these guys are out, they're like meeting up with a few friends along the way. They're like, oh, how's your victim hunting going? And one's lady like, oh, this guy, I've been training him all night. He's great. They also meet up with two younger little girls. They look like they're like 13 and 16 or so. But who knows how old they are. But the boys, they say, so you're going to get a pedophile tonight? And the girls are like, yeah, we're going to meet him. We're going to do away with him. So, like, they're doing good work.
Okay.
Getting
all
the
right.
pedophiles. But, like, they always look young, however young they were when they were turned. So that's how it works. There's also apparently a bar in Wellington called the Big Kahuna that's vampire-owned and operated. So they're allowed in there all the time. They have an open invitation. And it's here at the Big Kahuna where we meet Deacon's familiar, or his servant basically, who is a human named Jackie. And the deal is that if she does all of the ordering around and whatnot that Deacon wants from her, that he's eventually going to turn her into a vampire. And that's kind of like her big thing during the whole movie is she's like, okay, but when is this actually going to happen? I've been doing all of your stuff and I'm like over 30 now. I feel like I'm really kind of in my prime. Like it should happen now. And like you tell he has no intention of ever doing this. He's really just using her for work. And at this one point he says, all right, well, maybe this next time I need you to bring people over for a dinner party, and, you know, they're going to kill the people. And she's like, okay, I'll find some people. We, like, then follow her for a hot second where she's, like, calling people around, and she says in the little interview, like, they have to be people that I know, but absolutely don't like at all. And it sounds like she's experienced with looking up people that she knew in the past who she doesn't like, and then getting them to come to dinner parties.
That's gonna go quick, though. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like the guys do a lot of hunting on their own as well. This is just like an easy meal for them kind of thing.
Got it. Okay.
Then we kind of follow them around throughout the night as they try and get some victims. We learn that Vladislav used to be a very powerful vampire. He used to be able to hypnotize a whole crowd of people. And we, like, look at him going up to someone's window and being like, see me. And the guy, like, doesn't turn away from the TV at all. And Viago says something like, he hasn't been the same since his encounter with the Beast, who is his arch nemesis. And more on that later.
Okay.
The next thing that we see is the night of the dinner party, and Jackie has brought some people, and people she doesn't really like. They are Nick and Josephine. So, like, Nick and Josephine, you can tell they're, like, very creeped out by the situation because the house is not well kept, and Deacon still has not done the dishes, and it's just gross in there. Since it's a dinner party, they, like, serve up some spaghetti for the humans, but it's, like, spaghetti out of a can, and it's really gross. And they're like, ooh. Nick, why don't you try some paschetti?
Paschetti.
They can't say spaghetti. And so he takes, like, one bite of this cold canned spaghetti. And they're like, oh, we didn't know you liked eating worms. And they've turned his spaghetti to worms. And he's like, oh, no, that's gross. Oh, no. And he's just, like, out of it. He's like, I'm out of the situation. Trying to get out of the house. But all the doors are locked, of course. And he, he goes mad trying to find a way out, and the vampires are, like, chasing after him, and they, like, show up right around every corner, and it's like, oh my gosh, how are they getting to all these places? But it's because they're vampires, they're magic, whatever. He, like, goes into
the other
room.
Side of a horror movie.
Exactly. And one of the doors he opens is, like, the girl Josephine that he came with being eaten by Viago, and he's like, oh no, it's terrible. And then eventually he actually does get out, and he's running through the garden, and you're like, oh gosh, okay, he made it. And then Peter just jumps out of nowhere, like a jump scare, and takes him down. And we go, like, back to the house, and the boys are all like, oh no, Peter got him, poor fellow. And we think, you know, that's that. Peter got a meal. Then there's the screens, like, 2 months later. We open up with Deacon giving an interpretive dance performance to his roommates. And then Nick flies up to the window and knocks on it, trying to get in. And we learn that he had actually been turned into a vampire by Peter. And he's trying to, like, get himself in with this vampire crew. And in his interview, he says, well, you know, I feel like we're getting there. I feel like I'm not quite accepted yet. But then they realize, like, oh, he's actually okay to have around. Because he knows the bouncers to all the clubs in Wellington that they couldn't get into before. So he's able to get them to invite the vampires inside. They go into town, and they all, of course, have to have their fancy get-ups on. And we learn that Deacon doesn't really like Nick. He's like, I don't think Nick should have been turned into a vampire. And one of the main reasons why he doesn't like this is because Nick wears the same jacket that he does. Like, they're both wearing, like, circus ringmaster jackets, you know, with, like, the lapels and buttons and everything.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, he's stealing my style.
One of us is gonna have to change.
Yeah, exactly. And then as they're walking home from the nightclub, they actually pass by a pack of werewolves, which the big thing is werewolves, not swearwolves. And you get the idea that, like, the werewolves just have, like, a very tenuous grasp on their humanity, and, like, it's really hard for them to not lose control and just turn into wolves right then and there, which is why they always have to, like, have the little sayings like, werewolves, not swearwolves, guys, keep it down, it's okay. Like, they have to be calmed down like little puppies. There's this cool effect that they do with their eyes, like, you know, when a dog has their picture taken and their retinas turn all blue like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, like, whenever they, like, kind of look at the cameras, they've added in that effect so that their eyes, like, have that weird glowiness. But other than that, they look like completely normal dudes. And I just thought that was a cool little special effect thing. The show actually has, like, excellent special effects.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The werewolves gain tapetum lucidums.
Exactly, yes. At this point, we also meet Nick's friend, Stu, who is a human. And Nick is like, I'm never going to bite Stu because he's my mate, and I can't bite him because he's my best friend. But Stu, all this time, he doesn't know about the vampires or the werewolves, and he's, like, a little spooked after they encounter the werewolves, because one of them gets, like, a little bit wolfy with them. Like, kind of starts transforming, and his face, like, gets a little bit distorted, and Stu is just, like, a little freaked out about all that. So then when they get back to the house, they have, like, one of those emotional scenes that they have in, like, documentaries or reality shows or whatever, where, like, if someone has really bad news to break, they'll, like, sit them down, like, can I just have a conversation with you and be, like, really honest with you? And the camera people are, like, hiding behind corners but still trying to film and whatnot. And so they have that whole scene where Nick tells Stu that he's a vampire, but he's not gonna bite him. And then the other vampires realize, like, they love Stu. And he is, of course, invited into their home. And he can teach them all sorts of things. He's an IT specialist. And so he, like, teaches them about the internet and how to take pictures. And he sets them up a Facebook account. And very useful. It's just great. They love Stu more than Nick. Which is just funny.
Oh, poor Nick.
Yeah. The next night, they go to another nightclub. And Nick is telling people he's a vampire. And people are just kind of, like, brushing him off, like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's crazy, whatever. But people are also kind of digging it, like, yeah, vampire man, yeah.
Woo.
That we see one beat where he is telling people, like, yeah, I'm a vampire. And the guy goes, I'm a vampire hunter. And Nick says, haha, no, you're not. Well, turns out he was, because that night, or rather that day, the boys wake up in alarm to Peter shrieking in the basement. And they get down there and he's on fire. He's, like, rushing around. It seems like the basement window is somehow open. And Vladislav brings, like, a single cereal bowl of water and tries to throw it on him. And he's like, no, I was too late. And unfortunately, Peter does die.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it's very sad. Vladislav is very mad. He, like, does one of those things where he goes at the camera with his hand, like, cut the cameras! My friend has just died! And it is very sad. Later on, they go down there, and Nick has arrived back at the house as well, and they're like, all right, Nick, it's very spooky down here. You're going to see some very scary things. And we see, like, the burned corpse of poor Peter. They're sweet Peter, is what they say.
Yep, super sweet.
He's a sweetheart. Then they find out that there was, in fact, a vampire hunter. They can't see his head because it's all, like, contorted and weird because Peter shoved his crypt stone door on top of him and killed him. But then he still got caught in the sunlight from the open window that the hunter sneaked in on, unfortunately.
Bad luck.
Yeah. But anyway, so they spin around his head and it makes this awful cracking, breaking noise. And Nick's like, oh no, I know that guy. And they're like, what, do you know this guy? And he's like, yeah, I told him I was a vampire last night. And they get so mad at Nick. It's this huge thing. And they're, like, all flying up the walls and, like, fighting on the ceiling. And then they get a knock on the door. And it's the Wellington Police Department. And they're like, yeah, we got a call for a disturbance and there was some smoke. So we just wanted to come check out the premises. Viago has to hypnotize them. He says something like, you'll see nothing suspicious. And
these are not the droids you're looking for.
Exactly. And so, like, the vampires are, like, kind of stuck mid-flight. Like, Nick is pinned up on the ceiling, and Deacon is, like, flying up to him, like, actively mid-air, while Vladislav is trying to hold him back, but they're just, like, paused for a second while the police are coming through. And they're just, like, looking all around, but they're hypnotized. And at one point, one of the lady police officers says, like, oh, well, I don't think there's anything here. Oh, but wait a minute, do you see that? And she, like, shines her flashlight up in the corner of the room where Nick is currently flying. And they're like, what do you see? And she's like, there's no smoke detectors anywhere. So they basically get like a safety infraction, but the police officers don't see anything suspicious. And
Nope.
that's all fine. And so then they have a trial for Nick, and they list off the problems they have with Nick and decide as a vampire council of 3 that he is banished from the home indefinitely, but Stu can stay if he'd like. Stu doesn't. He goes back to his own home, but
Yeah,
they'll miss Stu. It's now several months later in the next scene, and they finally get the invitation to the Wellington Vampire Society Unholy Masquerade, which is at the 6th of June, the 6th month of the year, and it starts at 6 p.m. They're tickled about that. They love it. And it's going to be like the biggest thing of the year. There's also the Witch Society and the Zombie Society all coming together with them, so it's going to be a big party. And it's held at like a bowling alley. And there's always a guest of honor for this, the Unholy Masquerade, and Vladislav thinks that it's going to be him, but the invitation, it says, it's actually the Beast. And
oh, no.
Vladislav does not take this news well. He proclaims that he's not coming, and then he like goes into this state of deep depression, and his face turns all gross and old, and like he doesn't look 16 or whatever age he actually was anymore. He looks like Peter did. Not good. Anyway, so the other boys, they end up going. And it's really funny, at the party, Viago gets stuck talking to the zombie president for a second, and he's kind of like one of those guys where it's like, he just talks and talks and talks, and you can't really get a word in edgewise of just like, can you stop talking? You know those kind of clients, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
So the zombie president is kind of like that.
Oh, gosh.
And then we kind of have an interview with Deacon, he's talking to the cameras, and then Jackie like turns up behind him, is like, boo, and he's like, oh, how are you here, human? And she's like, oh no, I'm a vampire now. And he's like, who turned you? And apparently Nick actually turned her. Deacon gets even more mad at Nick about this. He's like, that was kind of my servant, and now you've turned her to a vampire. But then also Stu is here. Nick brought him as the +1, but that's not very good. Because he's a human in this place with all these people who want to eat him. Alright, so then the guest of honor is announced, and it's, yes, the Beast, but her name is actually Pauline Ivanovich, and it turns out that she was one of Vladislav's old girlfriends from years and years ago. And that's why he's mad. So she goes around, she is mingling with everybody, and then she shakes Stu's hand, and she's like, oh, you've got really warm hands. Are you a demon? And they're all like, no, he's a human, but he's the +1, so he's not here to be eaten. And everyone gets so mad about that, because they said, you've broken the code. You've brought a human here and not letting us eat them. And it's this huge fight. And then suddenly Vladislav does turn up in the most fabulous getup. He has like a fur cloak on, and it's spectacular. And he's
fabulous.
Like, exactly. And he says, and you won't eat this human, not on my watch. And Paulina, the Beast, says, and who are you? And so he has to like take off his mask, but it's not as dramatic as he wants it to be because the knot gets stuck. And so Viago helps him untie it, and he like takes off his mask, and he's like, it is I. And she's like, oh, okay. She like thought it was some terrible person. She's like, oh, it's you? Okay.
Oh, it's just you.
But then she has like this other new boyfriend who's going around with her at this point, and he gets into a fight with Vladislav all over Stu. They're trying to protect Stu, but then Stu actually, like, comes up with a wooden stake and stabs him through the back and saves himself, basically.
Yeah.
And they basically, like, just all get out. It's fine. No one pursues them, which is amazing. And on the way home, they're, like, celebrating Stu, like, Stu, you did it! And it's great. But then they run into the werewolf pack again. Because it's the full moon, they're chaining themselves to trees so that they don't go get up into any mischief. But, like, the vampires are kind of like egging them on, wasting their time, and then suddenly the moon comes out before they're all able to get tied up, and they do transform, and like the vampires are all able to get away, but sadly Stu gets got.
Oh no.
I know, it's terrible, and everybody is sad with that. Like, they're more sad about this than when Peter died, it seemed like. They all get into like a really bad place. Vladislav is pictured poking one of a victim again, so you know that he's not feeling good.
But no, he's a poker again.
Yeah. But then they get a text message from Nick that says, "Hey guys, I have a surprise." And so that the night when Nick is coming over arrives, and he's with Stu. Stu is there. Everything's fine.
Is Stu a werewolf now?
Yeah, Stu's a werewolf now. And the whole werewolf pack is like there as well. They all show up, and the vampires invite them in. Viago says something like, "Well, we were a bit worried at first, thinking that, oh no, will they just urinate on everything?" But they're all right. They're just smelly. They have a werewolf smell, and they're like, "But we just opened the windows, and then it was fine." And so now they're all friends. They're all buds.
Yay.
Another surprise at the end is Viago has turned Catherine, who was his former girlfriend, into a vampire. And so she's living with them now, even though she's like 96 years old. And they have this funny quote at the end, and they're like, "Some people say, what's with this age difference? What's a 96-year-old lady doing with a guy 4 times her age?" And they're like, "Oh, but we don't mind, and we're going to be together forever." And that's kind of the end of it. And it's funny. It's so funny. As I was like typing out this plot when I was watching it last night, I seriously had to stop typing and laugh out loud several times and then pause the movie and go back. It's so good.
I've enjoyed the series, and I know there's a spinoff more with that group, with Wellington Paranormal too. That I've watched like the first couple of episodes of, and that was pretty solid. So I feel like I have to go back and actually watch this movie now.
Yeah. I don't know where you can stream it for free. It used to be free on Prime, and that's how I first saw it, but now you have to rent it.
Yeah, that's okay. I can splurge and rent a movie every once in a while.
Yes, well, I highly recommend it. It's a good watch.
Excellent.
All right. Ready for some trivia?
I'm so ready for some trivia.
All right. So why can these vampires not eat real food? Is it A, because it just tastes so bad? B, because it makes them vomit blood? C, because it turns to ash in their mouth? Or D, because it literally gives them anaphylactic shock?
Does it literally give them anaphylactic shock? I know they vomit after they eat food.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go D.
No, it's not. It just makes them
it's
vomit
just the vomiting.
Blood. Yeah.
Okay.
There's this sad scene with Nick. He eats one French fry and then vomits blood for like 5 minutes.
Oh.
It's terrible.
I'd be so sad without French fries.
Oh yeah, he was sad. He's like, all this hype about being a vampire, I'm over it. This is not cool. Next one. What is Vladislav's favorite bit of the modern technology that Stu teaches him? A, how to watch sunrise videos on YouTube. B, how to poke friends on Facebook. C, how to make Skype calls. Or D, how to connect to the Wi-Fi.
How to poke friends on Facebook?
Yep.
Because he's the poker?
Yes. It's such a good scene because Stu is just like sitting there and he's like, and here you can poke them. And he's like, yes.
Oh God, dating ourselves with poking on Facebook.
It's from 2015.
Oh man.
Things have changed. All right. And then finally, what is not one of the reasons that the vampires list for banishing Nick? Is it 1, for telling people he was a vampire? 2, for having Peter killed by the vampire hunter? 3, for making the bloody mess after eating his French fries? Or D, for wearing the same coat as Deacon?
D, for wearing the same coat as Deacon. I feel like that's why he's mad.
No, they were all mad about that. Or at least they allowed Deacon to put it on the list. No, it was actually for making a bloody mess after eating the French fries. Because he just made that mess outside. It didn't matter to them.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
All right. So that was my summary for this week.
Beautiful.
All right. So now I gave you the quote.
You did.
Do you want me to read it all in its glory again?
I believe I know what it is.
All right.
I believe it's from I Am Legend.
Yeah!
Yes! Haha!
It's from the book. I've not actually seen the movie I Am Legend. I don't know if they say the same thing in it, but...
I don't think they do. There's not a lot of conversation that I remember in I Am Legend. It's been a minute since I've seen it. Mm-hmm. But I remember watching it, liking it so much that I read the story. So I was like, oh, I think I actually know this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
So anyway, based on all this, you can tell what kind of books I like to read.
Yeah.
Vampire books.
Vampires are great.
Yes.
And, like, I would have been super excited if you talked about Twilight, too.
I considered it, but not very hard.
That's fair. That's fair. It's just the quintessential, like, go-to, like, cheesy vampire novel to talk about.
Well, yeah, but why talk about cheesy vampire novels when you can talk about actually legitimately funny vampire things or cool vampire things?
Right.
All right. So, what is our next word?
Yeah, generator, what is our next word?
The next word is duck.
Duck. That's a solid choice. That's going to take some thinking.
I already have mine picked.
Oh,
I already know.
I have a quote. I actually have, like, my brain instantly jumped to a quote, but I don't think it actually has more than just the word in it one time. But
hey, that's okay.
We'll get there. So, we'll, as a reminder, we've dropped down to every other week now, so that we can get out podcasts for y'all.
Because we're busy.
Yeah. But hopefully you're enjoying, and so we'll see you in a couple of weeks, where we're gonna talk about duck. And if you've enjoyed our podcast, or if we've managed even to just get a sensible chuckle out of you, please share one of our episodes with your friends. That's how podcasts grow.
Please help us grow.
Yeah, we'd like to keep doing this. It's been super fun so far, and hopefully you're
we'll
enjoying us
probably keep
too.
doing it regardless.
But it'd be nice to know that other people are enjoying it too.
Yeah.
With that, I've been Stephanie.
And I've been Allison.
And this has been Nerd of the Week. Remember, if you don't have anything cool to say, play word association with the random word generator.
Yay!
Goodbye.
Bye!